Hey there. My name is Eddie Acosta. I'm the Vice President of Sales with Intelisys, and we're here live at Channel Connect. And I'm joined by some industry experts here, 3DG. So you guys want to just take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Eddie. So my name's Doug Cardozo. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and partner of 3DG Partners. My big focus in the role in the organization is helping find new routes to revenue for the business and, ultimately try and unlock top-line revenue growth.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, Eddie, thanks for having us here. My name is Guhan Raghu. I'm partner and chief operating officer for 3DG Partners. My role in the organization is to build out our practices and ultimately expand service offerings to our customers as we work with them deeper and deeper.
So you guys haven't been doing this quite as long as many, but you've had a lot of success. How did 3DG get started?
It's interesting. It's kind of a byproduct of COVID, for lack of a better way of looking at it, good, bad, or indifferent. All of the change that happened in COVID prompted us to go out and do something different and take our destiny into our own hands. Interesting enough, the business started out as almost like a staffing company, right? People placement and, CIOs looking for SVPs of IT, et cetera. We placed those individuals, and staffing kind of evolved into one-time service engagements, consulting, professional services, and at some point, as you're providing those types of consulting services, the customers just want an easier way to consume the overall solution. Hey, we're already working with you through this consulting initiative. Can we consume these products from you? And that's ultimately how we kind of ventured out into this space.
Yeah, that's a really unique model. Guhan, you come from a different perspective. So obviously Doug was in sales here, but you've been carrying a bunch of C-level titles right within the organization. Give us a little bit about what you've been doing and what's your role within the business, right? Are you placing yourself? Are you the virtual guy? Do you put your team out there? What does that look like?
Well, that's a great question. Basically, it draws on my last 10 years of my career have been a C-level executive in various capacities at retail, healthcare, and higher ed organizations, where ultimately it's all about scale, building scale. How do you help organizations not have to reinvent the wheel every time they want to grow bigger? And what I'm doing now is essentially the same thing that I was doing, just not in a corporate role anymore. I'm doing it for corporations. What I'm doing is building out practices and then implementing these practices at our customer locations so that they have basically someone who I didn't have when I was in the role, a partner to basically recognize where opportunities are, but then help them execute. Not just identify them and say, there's gold in those hills, but here's how we get there and here's how we ultimately solve problems together.
You guys have had a lot of success, all right? 18 months in, some might say the largest deal in channel history. You talk a lot about risk mitigation and due diligence as a service. What is that exactly? How do you define that?
Yeah, Guhan's always saying that risk erodes value, right? Especially when you're talking about publicly traded companies and things along those lines. So ultimately what we're trying to do is help mitigate risk for our clients. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. I think it's easy for salespeople to just automatically default to being, how do I make this cheaper for you? But customers aren't always just asking for cheaper. They want to find ways where you can mitigate risk, get more favorable contract terms that actually reduce the risk to the business. So better business downturn clauses, better breach penalties, reduced minimum commitments, et cetera. So a lot of what we do is we use our backgrounds and mine coming from the supplier side and understanding what levers we have to pull with these contracts, and then Guhan's coming from the customer side, knowing exactly what he has to do to get these technology purchases pushed through the board, right, and get people bought on to the solution. So, ultimately, we focus more on adding value by mitigating risk than we do just trying to simply reduce cost.
So Guhan, you're leading the consulting practice, and that's really different from what I'm seeing today. Most of our partners today are selling the as-a-service, the carrier service side of the house, but that consulting practice is pretty lucrative. How do you engage that practice? Who are you normally working with? What does that mean to an organization when they're working with 3DG?
When we work with our customers, there's a certain type of customer where our value proposition resonates more. It's the type of customer that wants to plot a course to revenue creation to cost reduction, all those types of elements. And the engagement that we have starts on the executive advisory side, where we help just analyze problems. So you can't just say we're a UCAS or a CCAS or any type of other type of shop. What we're really doing is focusing on, let's identify the value chain of this organization, the business as a whole. And then you can elevate those conversations and help those IT leaders. We work at the highest echelons of IT leadership because that's where these conversations resonate the most. And that's where we ultimately are able to help them accomplish these roadmaps and then deliver on these roadmaps and then justify their investments ultimately to boards and senior leadership.
I'm sure you get a little bit of an unfair advantage having those consulting services or those practices living in there. What kind of trust are you building with those customers with that practice right now? I mean, other than just the roadmaps and beyond.
Well, ultimately, if you think about it, this is all built on credibility. At the end of the day, you can't tell someone, here's what I would do if I've never done it before. So between Doug and myself, like he described earlier, even on contract analysis and negotiation, where a lot of times that's left to certain folks to figure out on their own, I've done it from sitting in their seat. We've sat in their seats before, the customer's seat. We know what they want to get accomplished and how much they want to be able to push a supplier to bend to solving a business goal. And Doug approaches it from, he knows what a supplier is capable of. And a lot of times credibility isn't just saying yes every single time a customer asks for something, having the courage and the trust to say, no, I think you're being unreasonable. Here's what's realistic.
Yeah, I love that. I assume you're not playing in like the mid-market or SMB space, right? It's got to be a little bit different. Your deals are by far historically some of the largest, right? Are you focused on that type of customer? How do you get into a customer like this? There's got to be some pre-existing relationships, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the existing relationships help you get a foot in the door. We do focus predominantly on large enterprise, Fortune 500. And the relationships might get you a foot in the door, but at these big companies, everyone's got to justify not just what they're spending their money on, but who they're spending their money with, right? And so the relationship alone isn't going to get you there. It gets you the seat at the table, though. I jokingly say it's kind of what you know that opens the door, and the consulting or who you know that opens the door, and what we know in terms of how Guhan's approached our consulting practice has ultimately been what's helped us get really wide and sticky in these accounts. I mean, we have some organizations, probably one of our largest clients, we have 8 full-time employees working there year-round that have been there for, going on 2 years, right? So, large enterprise, a lot of it, again, it's relationships, and then once you've executed a certain level of scale, it opens up the doors to a million other things because very few people can say that they've executed at the level of scale that we're talking about.
I think over the last 30 years, you've seen this large adoption of people buying through the enterprise space. You might have created the new goal, the new big level. We're really excited to have you here. I have no doubt in my mind that you guys are going to get granted a red jacket here in the very near future. You know what that means to so many of the partners out there, right? Those of you that have had the opportunity to put a red jacket on, you know what type of hard work it took to get there. These guys are putting in that hard work day in and day out. I mean, I want to say the time that you described the first deal you worked on, you crunched, so many hours just doing some prep into that, right? I mean, I can't even imagine. And you still worked full time, right, at your previous corporate gigs while you're doing this on the side.
Yeah, it was a lot of late nights. Once the family was ready to go to sleep, we were getting back to work and starting job shift 2, right? But it's the story of any successful entrepreneur, I'd say, is it's that hard work going above and beyond in the after hours, oftentimes.
You gotta put in the work for the outcomes, and then the income follows.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, guys. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. Guhan, you got a little something you want to say?
Yeah, well, up next, stick around for our day 1 wrap-up.
Later, guys. Appreciate your time.